This is Sharon Bornholt with the Louisville Gals Real Estate Blog, back here today with another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. My guest today is a fellow Louisvillian, Erik Hitzelberger, and Erik and I are going to talk today about how to be successful investing part-time in real estate. Erik is an engineer by day. That's his, I like to say, is his day job. He's a licensed real estate agent, and he is a very successful part-time real estate investor. And I know this because he and I have worked together a number of times, and I like to tell people he's one of my good cash buyers. But Erik doesn't intend to leave his job right away, so he's developed a system, and we're going to talk about that, about how to be successful investing in real estate part-time. You know, and this is while you're having a full-time job, while you still keep your full-time job. So, hi, Erik. It's good to have you here today.
Hi, Sharon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of put this out on Facebook today. We're doing this on a Sunday, and I tell people all the time, when you're in real estate investing, you're probably going to be working some weekends, but if you're doing it part-time, you're going to have to figure out how to allot your time and get it all done, and we're going to talk about that during this podcast. But why don't you start off telling everybody a little bit more about yourself and how you first got started investing in real estate?
Sure. I started probably in 2007, and I got into flipping houses. Actually, it was just really something that I wanted to do. I was going to do it, and actually when I started off kind of as a hobby more so than as a business. But really just went out, you know, there was all the TV shows and everything at the time, and I kind of thought that was something I could do. Went out and just bought a house. And, you know, I kind of did everything wrong, at least initially from a business standpoint. Mm-hmm. I did a great deal of the work myself, and you know, so I spent every weekend I was going to the house before work, going to the house after work, to get all these things done. And, you know, it ended up, I sold the house. I only had it for about three and a half months. The market was pretty good at the time, and got rid of it. It was on the market, I think, for about 10 days, and got rid of it and made some money. So I enjoyed that. You know, I was able to take that money that we made and actually remodel the basement of my personal house, make a big play area for our kids. So financially it was great. But the hardship, you know, that I experienced was the time and the commitment. So, you know, the next house, I kind of followed that same model. But shortly thereafter, I started thinking more and more about how do I systemize this, and how do I, you know, make more dollars per hour with my time, and use other people's time to, you know, do the things that are less value added.
Right. And, you know, that's pretty much everybody's story. I think you start out, if you look back on your first couple of deals, it was more of a hobby because you rarely knew what the heck you were doing, and you were smart enough to do it, but you don't have the systems, you don't have the infrastructure, and you just kind of jump in, which is, of course, what sets entrepreneurs apart from everybody else. So now I was trying to remember, did you get your real estate license before you started investing, or was it kind of simultaneously or after?
No, it was a couple years later when I got my license. When I started, I had a great agent. I worked with her, and we're still actually good friends. But she would send me listing alerts. She'd set up the appointments. We'd go look at the house. She'd write up the offer, take care of all those aspects of the business for me. And then, you know, of course, whenever the house was sold, she would do the marketing and put it on the MLS and get the thing sold. So, you know, having someone else as an agent when you're doing this part-time is actually a wonderful asset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think you don't certainly need a real estate license to be an investor, but if you're going to be a rehabber and you're going to list the house, there are definitely advantages to having your license. People get into a quandary sometimes over the whole thing of I'm an investor, I'm a realtor. But if you have a career, a whole different career, so I don't think that's as big of an issue for someone who's basic intention. You're not a listing agent. You're going to buy and sell your own properties generally.
That is true. I do generally do that, but I also have 4 other investor clients that I help them as well, and so I'll list their properties and help them buy properties, and do kind of all the things for them that an agent should do, and try to minimize their time at this.
So, yeah, but you're working with investors, so that's another key thing.
Yes. So I'm just kind of a glutton for punishment, but really, as far as my own time, but really there are enough deals out there that there's not a conflict, between them and I. We work in similar areas, so if I'm looking for properties, a lot of times I'll just find one that maybe it doesn't fit exactly what I want to do, or maybe I've got a couple other things going on at this time, and so I'll Brian, my partner, or some of these other people, I'll farm those deals over to them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great way to work it. So, if someone is going to start out and they have another job, they have a career, how much time does it take every week or on a regular basis for them to be successful at flipping houses part-time?
That's a great question, and it's a very common misconception that it takes this tremendous amount of time. If you do it right and you're following a system, it can be as little as a couple of hours per week. In fact, many weeks during the process, during the rehab, you don't actually have anything to do unless you're trying to do multiple rehabs at the same time. But a person could easily do 2, if not 3 rehabs a year in probably less than 50 to 60 hours total. So, you're talking about there'll be a couple points where it really is 5 or 6 hours that week, because you have to do a scope of work or you have to do some of the more tedious tasks, I guess. Mm-hmm. But the rest of the time, it's not a whole lot of time per week.
Okay. Yeah, and we're going to dive into that more, but that's back to what you said initially, that you had a lot of time in the process when you were doing the work yourself, when you didn't have systems. Yes. And boy, it's a whole different ball game when you've got those systems. You can actually have a life then too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So if someone wanted to get started flipping houses, people seem to come into this with from a couple of different directions. There's some people that maybe have a construction background, or they're a tradesperson and they've got some general knowledge. So you'll have those folks that have some knowledge, maybe not all of it, maybe just pieces of it. But on the other side of the equation, you'll have those folks that really have absolutely no knowledge. So can those folks be successful?
Certainly. And years ago when I started learning how to play golf, I went to a class and the instructor asked who had played golf before. And the people that raised his hands, he said, okay, you're going to be my problem children because you think you know what you're doing. The people who didn't raise their hand, he kind of said, all right, you're the ones that are going to be able to learn. And that's kind of true of this business as well. If you have a background, I think you're going to have a stronger tendency to want to try to do something yourself. Mm-hmm. That you really shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you don't know anything about construction, it's much easier to rely on the people you should be relying on, the contractors that you're going to hire, mm-hmm. the agents that are involved, the title attorneys, all of those people, and let them do what they're experts at. There are people who have careers as painters. That should, they should be the ones painting your house. You shouldn't do it just because you think you know how.
Yeah, or you think you can save a couple of bucks, which doesn't always work out. It doesn't always work out either, because sometimes when you do something, somebody else has to come back in and redo it. So let's move on to getting the deals. Now, you're obviously a real estate agent, and doesn't really matter which niche you're in or which strategy you use. If you're a rehabber or a landlord or a wholesaler, you've got to have a way to get deals. So either they come into your marketing, into your business through marketing, or you have to get them another way. So what do you do? I mean, I know that obviously that you work with wholesalers, but tell me a little bit about how you get your deals.
I've tried about everything. I've done direct marketing. I've done bandit signs. Probably 80% of my deals have honestly come off the MLS. Another, maybe of the rest, 10 or 15% have come from wholesalers. I prefer those two channels really because it takes away a lot of the time from my aspect of it. Wholesalers, that's a lot of work. And it's a lot of time that I don't have. So if somebody can just bring me a deal, I can analyze it. I can look at it and decide whether yes, there's a profit potential here for me and we can move forward. MLS is kind of the same way. If you set up good listing alerts, not just general ones, but very good specific listing alerts, the number of homes that come to your email every day is very small, and you can look at those and spend some time on each one of those and decide whether you want to go look at the house and move forward quickly.
Yeah. Once again, you're leveraging your time because the MLS can be a big time sucker too if you just get on there and hang out on the MLS looking at everything. So I think you hit upon a key point there. So what about now, moving back to the day when you didn't have your license, your real estate agent did that for you. You developed this relationship, in other words, with the real estate agent.
Yes. And that's really what I recommend people do, especially starting out. Find a good agent, find somebody who can understand what you're trying to do and who can, help you by eliminating a lot of wasted time, setting up, good listing alerts. Here's a good hint, right? Real estate is hyper local. It changes not just by the city you live in, but by the neighborhood that you're in. So if you're in a town like Louisville, for instance, where there's multiple zip codes, you shouldn't have one listing alert that covers the whole city. I have a listing alert per zip code, and sometimes I even break it down further than that so that, we have an area of town where there are, it's a very eclectic area. People like to walk to everything. It's a highly desirable area, and the range of people who live there is pretty broad. So 25% of the homes in that area are sold with 2 bedrooms or less. So I might consider in my listing alert a 2-bedroom house. In another part of town, where it's more families and more neighborhoods, you can look at the statistics there, and only 2% of homes are 2 bedrooms. So those listing alerts should be drastically different for those two areas, and that helps me sort out properties that I would never want to buy.
Right. Yeah, that's great information, and I think it's hard for people in the beginning to kind of niche down and focus and know exactly what to focus on. So one of the big things that we wanted to talk about today is systems. I know you're big on systems. I like systems, and it's probably the most important thing, I think, for success in if you're going to do real estate part-time, because you simply don't have the time to do everything. So you've got to figure out how to maximize your time, and once you've done something, with the system, you can oftentimes not do everything start to finish again. So did you kind of come about creating systems? I'm assuming you did out of need, so things wouldn't fall through the cracks, so you didn't have to duplicate your efforts. So you said on your first couple of houses you didn't really have systems, which is pretty common. So how would you say, at what point did you decide after those first couple of houses that you needed systems then, or was it further down the road?
I started actually fairly early with a deal analysis spreadsheet. So, for my first house or so, because it was a fairly competitive market, one of the challenges was that I wasn't confident in my ability to estimate prices. So, I kind of went about this wrong, like several other things. And instead of getting a contractor to come with me or something, what I did was I tried to go write down every little detail of every house and then go to Lowe's at during my lunch breaks and estimate all those costs. And that was time consuming. And what was happening was I was missing out on deals because I couldn't act fast enough. So the first system I actually set up was kind of a deal analysis spreadsheet. And I also had somewhat of a repair estimate checklist. And I kind of limped along with those two. They helped a lot. I mean, that's probably two of the most important things that you can have: a way to estimate costs quickly, and then a way to evaluate a deal quickly. I kind of limped along with those for a few years, and then I finally decided that, yes, I wanted to turn this into a business, and I started systemizing things then. And then when I partnered with Brian Snyder, who's my partner in this business, we really went all out in trying to systemize everything. We've got we even have a spreadsheet for how to contact the utility companies and get the utilities turned on. The point being that I want to be able to give this to anyone and have them go do it so that I don't have to.
Right. That's a great idea. If you've got everything just laid out for you, then it's much simpler just to go through the process. And I think a lot of people, when they first start creating systems, they've got some systems, but then they find themselves still doing some things over and over again. So you start with your systems, Absolutely. Then you kind of need, we've talked about this a little bit, but you need a team. You can't do this by yourself. You're going to first of all, you don't have the skills to do everything. And like you, I believe that you should really work on where your best skill set is. Someone calls it your core genius. Whatever your core genius is, that's what you should be doing, and everything else somebody else should be doing. So are there any team members that should be on your team if you're a part-time real estate investor that would be different than for a full-time real estate investor?
Well, I think, the people on your team, you should have an agent for sure. A good contractor is a great asset also. Someone who can go in and give you an estimate, maybe when you don't even have to go to the house. They can meet your agent, and the two of them can come up with your estimate for you, and you can proceed. Other than that, you certainly need a lender who understands your business and is willing to help you grow. Title attorney for asking questions, so you need those whether you're doing full-time or part-time. If you can get a virtual assistant or a local part-time assistant when you're working full-time, it is a wonderful, wonderful asset. I have both at this point in time, and it just makes my life so much better. The two of them are involved. So.
Yeah, I think I know I was so guilty of this. In another business, I had an employee or two, and I really did not want an employee per se. So I just waited way too long to outsource some things. And boy, that is one thing I regret the most, because like you said, there are virtual assistants. You can sometimes share people. There's all different kinds of ways you can go about getting a little bit of help. That's not going to cost you a fortune, but it makes an enormous difference in your life and in your business.
Yes.
So
now there are a lot of people out there who even here in Louisville, I've got one girl who just basically runs errands, and she just works part-time for me. She works for a couple other investors as well, and so you mentioned sharing. That's a fantastic way to get started. With having somebody help you eliminate some of this lower value added tasks.
So you said runs errands, like as in what type of errands does she do?
She does a whole lot of stuff. But for me, she'll take paperwork places. Okay. She takes stuff to the bank. She will go put lock boxes on houses for me. Okay. Recently I had her actually go and start to complete our property repair estimate checklist. So now she's the one out there looking at the house and trying to determine what level of work needs to be done.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I would think that if you had somebody you worked with consistently, you could start to add things and give them different jobs to do. Like they could take pictures. There would be a lot of things that you wouldn't really need a highly skilled person or a technical person to do. So I think we kind of covered, I wanted to talk about people might be really reluctant to take on what another job, like as a real estate investor with a full-time job. But I think the tools that you've given, though, with the systems, with having some help, those would be things that they could do. So what might be some of the other reasons people might be hesitant to jump into this field?
I think the couple of things that come to mind right away, like you mentioned, the perception that it takes a lot of time. Hopefully we've dismissed that it really isn't that much time. Having the confidence to proceed, I think, I see the concern that people have. I've talked to a lot of different people. Obviously, I have an engineering background. A lot of the people that I, work with also, have a similar type background, and getting caught up on trying to analyze everything is a big deal for people. They want to know for a fact that, I'm going to make, this dollar amount down to the penny. And that's challenging. You're not going to know that. But you can get fairly accurate, and decide that, okay, if it's in this range, will I be happy? And if you are, then go forward. If you're not, then, find another property. So not overanalyzing deals, and having the confidence to move forward, which again, you can get from a system, because that real estate is very repeatable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, boy, education is power, isn't it? Information is power. So let's talk a little bit about your system. I have taken a real good look at it. I've rehabbed a fair amount of houses in my time, and I know what components should be there. And I found that your system is it's very comprehensive, and I've tried to find something that I thought might be left out, and honestly, I couldn't find it. So my hat's off to you. But your Erik's system is called Part-Time Real Estate Investing, Part-Time RIA, Lunchtime Profit System. And I think that's a great name. I think that just signifies that you can do this part-time, that you don't have to have a tremendous amount of hours. And as I understand, I believe there are 13 recordings and 25 forms in there, if I got that part right.
I think that's correct,
yeah,
yes.
I think 13, yeah. So it's 13 audios. So I noticed that it was clearly laid out in the manner in which we do things. And I thought that piece was really helpful. So, you've got developing your buying criteria, analyzing, estimating repairs, making offers, due diligence, the scope of the work, working with contractors, and we're going to kind of double back and talk about those. But one thing that I was really happy to see that you included in there was mindset. This is a huge thing for people, just owning the fact and knowing that they can actually do this. So talk a little bit about that. Did this come about because you had to maybe adjust your mindset a little bit, or how did that piece come about?
Yeah, I think, there's been two or three different things that I saw in myself and I see in other people that repeatedly come up, and that are critical to overcome. The first one is changing from I can't do something to how do I accomplish this? Mm-hmm. For a long time I didn't invest, even though I wanted to, just because I thought, well, it takes too much time, or it takes too much money, or I don't know what I'm doing, so I can't do that. But had I been asking, how do I go do this? Mm-hmm. I think, my career would be a lot farther along. Mm-hmm. And so that's the first major hurdle. Start asking how, and you'll start finding answers. The second is, gets back to the time piece, but how do I get someone else to do this for me? So the things that are just low value added activities, calling the utility company, going out, running to Lowe's, running to, here or there. How can I get somebody else to do those for me? And the answer to that is to have good systems. Have a document in place that you can hand to somebody, and they can instantly see what needs to be done and go take care of it. Mm-hmm. The third piece is, and this one's challenging for me particularly, but focus on generating revenue and not on minimizing expenses. Mm-hmm. I want to do things that make $1,000 an hour not save $10 an hour.
Right.
The problem with that, and everyone will say that they agree with that statement, but when it comes to actually implementing it, you'll see, oh, well, that electrician's going to charge me $50 to change that outlet. I can do that for $5,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll suddenly be changing outlets for, 2.5 hours and realize, well, that was 2.5 hours. If I really had that time, I could have dedicated it to finding the next deal, or I could have dedicated it to improving my business in some other way.
Yeah.
That's
big. That's a big thing. Go find another deal
Yes.
and let somebody else do the other work.
Yes.
So let's go back to what I consider is one of the first pieces, and I think people really get hung up on this piece, and that is to develop your buying criteria. And once you've done that and you've found a house, how do you analyze? You analyze it, and you've got to figure the repairs. So we talked a little bit about visiting Lowe's, but there are spreadsheets and things. Once you have the prices, and a furnace on a 1,000 square foot house is going to cost this much, about how much it's going to cost. So talk about that piece of your course, or those pieces of your course.
Sure. So the buying criteria, I kind of touched on a little bit, but you set that up with your agent, and your agent has the power of the MLS. The real power to me is the statistics that are there. So you can analyze, like I said, a zip code or a neighborhood, and look for what's selling in that area. Is it a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a garage, and at what price it is. And you can really set up specific criteria that, hey, okay, I want to be, 20% below median value, whatever those are. Set that up with your agent. As far as, estimating the repairs, yes, one of the big transitions that I made in saving time is I stopped trying to say, okay, well, this kitchen needs a 36-inch base cabinet, a 24-inch drawer cabinet, et cetera, and pricing each of those components individually. Instead, I said, look, it costs me about $3,500 to do the cabinets and counters in a house. It costs me about $1,800 or $2,000 to do the appliances. And we set up this property repair estimate checklist so that you can walk through a house in about 15 minutes, mark yes or no to those items, and then you leave that house with a really good estimate of the total budget of the house.
Right.
You then go plug that into your deal analyzer spreadsheet, and you have an answer, of what your maximum allowable offer is within a very short period of time.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I know, like you, after a while, now you just spouted off those figures. Those figures, and I know those now, but that wasn't always the way. And when you're starting out, you need those things written down, and you need to know. Well, somebody said the other day, and I thought this was a great way to look at it. Things can almost, a lot of things they're figured by the square foot, by the running foot, or, there are just formulas that you can put in there, or by the yard, carpets by the yard, things are by the yard.
Sure.
So once you get a grasp on even those types of numbers, it really becomes pretty simple to get it close enough to be safe. And then I'm sure you do. I always plug in an extra amount in there for things you can't see, things you're going to find. I call it my fudge fund. And
yes,
then you're safe. It's like I tell people you should figure your comps conservatively and figure your repairs on the high side, and you usually be fine.
Yes.
So then once you've made your offer and you've got the house, you've got to do your due diligence, you've got to map out your scope of work, and then you've got to think about working with contractors. So let's talk a little bit about that piece of it.
Okay. So there's two different ways to work with contractors. The one that I probably recommend for someone getting started out is to find a good general contractor, someone who can handle everything, and that you can turn the project over to him or her. And the best way to do this, honestly, is once you have your checklist in place or your scope of work in place, get a couple quotes from a couple different people. I actually recommend 3. Find somebody you're comfortable working with who understands what you're trying to do, and, get that number from them and then let them go do what they do. I mean, that's what general contractors do. They manage repairs or manage the construction of homes. The second way, if you're a little bit more confident in what you're doing, is that you can go and break the project up, and you can serve as the general contractor by hiring subcontractors to do the different tasks. So you can have an electrician go out there and a plumber and, the carpet people and the paint people. That takes a little bit more time and a lot more coordination, because now you've got to contact all these people. And if you're trying to get 3 quotes for every aspect of that it's a little more challenging but it can be done as well.
Yeah, well, that's a great tip there. And I think that goes back to where you are at the time you start your business, and that will change over time. You might not feel confident enough to be the general contractor initially, but over time you could certainly do that if that's what you wanted to do. So then we've got those pieces down. So now we're going to start the actual rehab process and what you do before the rehab process, and then the marketing of the property once you've got it done. So let's talk about that piece a little bit.
Okay, so this is where I see a lot of people make mistakes. What you do between the time that you have a contract in place and the time that you actually close on the house, so you purchase it and it becomes yours, is the most important thing in rehabbing any home. A lot of people, don't take advantage of that time, but it is so valuable, So while you're in that process, you've got the contract that's accepted. What you need to be doing, the first and most important thing you need to do is to generate the scope of work. And that is really kind of where you're going to spend the most time in this whole rehabbing process, is on that one single document. And the point of the scope of work is to identify everything that needs to be done, how you want it to be, how you want the repairs to be completed, and just eliminate any ambiguity between you and the contractor, or you and whoever's going to do the work. So if I spend, let's just say 15 hours on a total rehab from start to finish, at least 5 of those hours are on that scope of work.
Right.
So it's going through, and we will, document exactly line by line what needs to be done, and also what SKU numbers go into the house for faucets and lights, and what paint colors, and so that anyone picking up that document can look at it and say, okay, this is what I'm responsible for. Here's the information I need, and now I'll go get started.
Yeah, that's good. So in theory, then everything should go pretty smoothly, but we know that sometimes that doesn't always happen. So I think some of this probably goes back to the mindset too. So folks tend to worry about, what am I going to do if it doesn't all turn out? What if it doesn't go perfectly? And of course, the first piece of advice you want to give them is, it's not going to all go perfectly. But how do you build contingencies in there? Or do you have, I'm sure, some type of a fudge fund, or a what if this happens? How do you deal with what maybe we call them setbacks?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. First, it's important in your initial estimation that you do have a little bit of contingency on your repair estimate checklist, and you do have contingency for carrying costs in your deal analysis spreadsheet. We usually use 6 months is the time that we expect to hold a house, and I usually use about 5% on my property estimate, repair estimate checklist for costs. I would caution people against being overly contingent because you'll lose deals that would have been good deals. But at the same time, you do need to recognize that, hey, even though I can do this work in 1 month, that doesn't mean it's going to sell right away, or, another factor to consider, speaking of sell right away, is the time of year. Certain markets have better seasons than others. In Louisville, it's very hard to sell a house in November, December. So if we're going to finish up in October, I'm going to add a couple extra months because I really just have very little expectation of being able to sell that house in November, December.
Yeah.
And I'm planning on carrying it until, the first quarter of the first year of the next year.
Yeah. And that's so important to know your market. While probably I would venture to say it's hard to sell a property anywhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's probably not as big of a problem in a warmer climate.
Yeah.
I'm pretty, I'm certain that's true. So you have a lot of forms in your course here. So let's talk about those. I think most of us kind of develop those forms one at a time, but I bet if I ask 20 investors, show me all your forms, I bet they won't have all the forms you have in there. You've got a really comprehensive batch of forms in there.
Yes. No, we really did sit down and try to think of every single aspect of a rehab. What are the activities that we have to do, and how do we develop a form to systemize it? And especially with the goal in mind of how do we develop a form to systemize it so that someone else can do it. Like you said, you've been through it. I know that Brian and I have both been through it several times. Trying to find, different things that we can add. I think we're pretty satisfied right now, although anytime we come up with something new, it'll certainly be added. But this is a business that we operate every single day. And so we want it to work for ourselves as much as we want it to work for anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any final advice you would give people if they want to start out in this business and they, other than we want them to take a hard look at your system, because it really is, well, I'm not familiar with any system that looks like this, that has the components of this. It really is a comprehensive system for anyone that's thinking about doing rehabbing, whether part-time or full-time. But it's especially helpful for anyone that's thinking about part-time real estate investing. So you have any final advice for folks that, may be sitting on the fence, waiting to jump into this business, that you could make them, take the leap?
Sure. A couple of points, and not that I want to push people over the fence the other way, but, I think the most important thing, or one of the most important things to being successful, is that you honestly evaluate yourself and the lifestyle that you have and the time that you have, and decide whether this one particular aspect of investing or another best suits, your goals. If you travel a lot, you can't answer the phone at work, you're not available very much, don't try to be a wholesaler. Mm-hmm. Wholesalers need to be able to return calls right away. They need to be able to go look at properties very quickly. So make sure that what you're trying to accomplish is feasible. I particularly love flipping houses. I think it's a great business to be in as a part-time job, because it doesn't require a lot of my effort. It doesn't require me to be somewhere at a given time, with the exception of maybe the closing table. Mm-hmm. So I can adjust my schedule to make it work. The second thing is that, I absolutely recommend finding a system. I did not do this, and it was just painful. I mean, the money that I spent learning on my own versus learning from someone else, it's just, it's it's orders of magnitude different. I probably bought 3 or 4 houses with Federal Pacific electric panels in them, and I didn't account for that as an expense just because it wasn't on a checklist somewhere. I have a friend, actually someone you know as well, Sharon, who bought a house that didn't even have a foundation in it, and he didn't realize it till after he owned the house. That's a huge mistake.
Huge mistake. Yeah.
And so a course that will prevent that is just invaluable. I tell people the people that I work with, I said, you're going to make mistakes, and you're allowed to make mistakes. You just can't make my mistakes. Yeah. And that's what we try to eliminate with this course. But we try to eliminate, any of the big mistakes. So, if you set a goal of making $15,000 and you make 12, to me, that's still a good day.
It's still a good
especially
day.
if you did it. If you did it in 15 to 20 hours, I think it's a spectacular day. It's finding those systems that will make sure that you don't, make 2,000 after that, or that you don't spend 500 hours to make that, that $10,000 where you could have almost gone to McDonald's and gotten a job. We don't want you to have a job. We want you to invest money. We don't want you to make sacrifices. And this is, maybe the last important point that I'll try to make here, but I don't want to sacrifice the time with my family and friends and doing the things that I want to do for some hope at a better future. And I'm sure, most of your listeners don't want to do that either. We want this system to make it such that you're able to do this, to accomplish goals, whether they be short-term of, paying off credit card debt or paying off school debt or whatever, or longer-term, planning for retirement goals, or even just simple things like going on a big vacation. Mm-hmm. We want you to be able to accomplish that without making huge sacrifices. I'm not going to tell anybody, oh, it's easy and you just buy this and you'll be rich, because that's not true, and it's just foolish. But at the same time, we can make it very, very manageable for you, and that's really the goal here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. We talk a lot about lifestyle businesses, and I think that's something that people that are living at this point in time, it doesn't really matter how old you are. You look around and go, gee, I'm just working too darn hard. You're looking for ways to have more, but not necessarily spend a tremendous amount of time and give up other things to have more. Now, that's not to say that in the beginning you're not going to have to work. You are going to have to work at this. But with the proper systems, you can cut that down drastically. And what I tell people to think about this, someone mentioned to me the other day that they wanted to get a part-time job to earn some extra income, and I said, well, have you ever considered real estate? Because they knew that, I've done this for a long time. And they said, well, I don't know, I can go over here and work nights and make this amount of money. And I said, but gosh, you could renovate 2 or 3 houses a year and have a nice big 5-figure paydays. Did you ever stop to really think about that? If you've got a job and you do real estate on the side, you can make chunks of cash, whether you're rehabbing or which is where your biggest chunks are going to come from, certainly. But there are a lot of ways to make money in real estate, but you can make those chunks of cash, and like you said, you can pay down debt. You can put it in your IRA, which is another whole story, and invest with that money. Or you can take a nice vacation, but it gives you so many options. And real estate is one of the best ways I know of to make big chunks of money. So where can they get more information on your course, Erik?
Okay, so the course itself is on our website. It is part-timerei.com. And then to get to the course, it is, so parttimerei.com/sales/LTPS, and that stands for Lunchtime Profit System. Mm-hmm. So they can go there and read more about the course. And then also, if they're still, debating what to do and how to move forward, you can just go to our regular website at part-timerei.com and download our property repair estimate checklist for free. So, you can check that out. And see if that's the type of system that you like, that is fairly representative of everything else that we're offering here. Okay, and what's the price point, Erik, on the course? The course is $997, I believe.
Okay, what a bargain. Okay, so if you all have any questions for Erik, you can leave them on my blog, and I'll be sure that he gets them answered, or you can leave them over there on his site. Erik's there to, Erik or his partner Brian, they'll be there to help you figure out, how you can make this work for you. But be sure and check it out, Part-Time REI, Lunchtime Profit System, and just take a leap of faith that you can do this, that you can make this work for you. So thanks, Erik, for coming on today, for giving up your Sunday to come on and tell everybody about this, and we can finally get this done.
No problem, Sharon. Thank you for having me.
And this is Sharon Bornholt, and I'll be back next week with another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing.